Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome to PNP Live. My name is Beth Wong, and I work in events for Politics and Prose. We thank you so much for joining us tonight in this new format where we're continuing to bring you the authors you love and their new books to our PNP community. At any time during the event tonight, you can click on the green button below to purchase tonight's book on PNP's website. We are currently offering free media mail shipping as an incentive, especially as our physical stores are closed and we need your online purchases in order to keep bringing you the programming PNP is known for. Tonight, as a very special promotion, you'll also receive a special book plate signed and personalized by the author Veronica Roth if you buy the book from our website. Tonight, you can also ask the author a question by clicking on Ask a Question found near the bottom of your screen. We've got 6 in there already. That is very exciting. You can also read other people's questions and vote for the ones you'd like to hear answered most in that box as well. A reminder that unlike our in-person events, the author, host, and audience members cannot see you through the screen. We welcome you tonight in your pajamas, in your yoga clothes, in your whatever. On to the main event. Veronica Roth proved herself a master storyteller and world builder with her award-winning Divergent trilogy. And in Chosen Ones, her first novel for adults, she spins an insightful tale about coming of age in today's world. She's joined in conversation tonight by C.A. Higgins, author of the Lightless trilogy. Welcome, Veronica and Caitlin.
Hi.
Hi. Thank you for having us.
Yes, this is great. Thanks to everyone who is here and has their robot avatars in place.
Very cute robot avatars.
Yeah.
So we're here to talk about Veronica's new book, which is awesome.
Well, thanks. I hope we also talk about you. So I have been waiting years to talk to you.
But something that's super cool about this book and is the sort of subject of this conversation is the spectrum of science fiction to fantasy. And so sort of like the rules that make up your world. And something that's super cool about Chosen Ones is the magic system, which the characters don't really know at the beginning, but they discover it as the reader discovers it. And that's very interesting, but I really want to know what was the inspiration behind those super cool, like flesh-eating tornadoes, because that was awesome.
Oh, thanks. Yeah.
I love
these. I'm going to give a quick summary of the book just to start.
Go for it.
Okay, so Chosen Ones. Yeah, Chosen Ones is about a group of 5 people who defeated a Dark Lord, like a very classic Dark Lord figure called the Dark One when they were teenagers. And now it's 10 years later and they're dealing with issues with a capital I. And they're also very famous. And, evil doesn't stay buried, or whatever that tagline from The Descent is, or whatever movie that is.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the rough outline, but they do encounter, obviously, like the Dark Lord figure, the Dark One, had to do something evil. So what he did is inflicted this magical event that people thought was like an alien invasion or like a natural disaster on North America, like many, many times. It killed a whole hell of a lot of people. And those are called the Drains, which are the like life-sucking tornadoes that you're talking about. I went through a couple like iterations of these, I think, in drafts. I was like, okay, well, he's got to kill a lot of people. And my theory for the book is that your concept of evil becomes complicated the older you get. So when you're a teenager, it'll be very straightforward. So I wanted it to be in the past, Sloane's past would be very straightforward destruction. So basically just like people ripped apart limb from limb and like just, like unambiguous, and then, kind of the forward moving narrative, evil becomes a more complicated force in her life, and something that she doesn't relate to quite as straightforwardly. So that's kind of like where the inspiration for them was. I wanted to do like a weird, like the one version of it that I'm sad I lost, but it was just too complicated because I could have written a whole book about just that, was that like each person would get caught in like time unraveling. So they'd like age down and then age back up. And then I was just like, this would be cool. But then it was like, yeah, it's like suddenly you have to think about time travel. And I was just like, I don't know about that.
Yes.
So that was kind of the point of inspiration for it.
But yeah, you were thinking about like not to spoil anything very good, but like the idea of alternate universes and time travel as a sort of connection between type thing.
Yeah. Well, I still remember the day, like my husband and I were trying to work out. Well, he was just dealing with my like completely impossible way of trying to explain what was wrong with this book. But I was trying to figure out my antagonist because that's a struggle that I have had since the beginning of my career. Is I just don't like. It's hard for me to develop that psychology well and to structure a plot so that you can learn things about a villain figure.
Right.
And we were talking about it, and suddenly we're talking about alternate universes and like multiverse theory and like time travel and wormholes and how do they work. And I was like looking up like wormhole stuff on the internet, and I was like, this is insane. And eventually we cracked it.
Oh my God, you solved it.
Yeah, no, I mean, not.
Wait, we have to call MIT quick.
Yes, it's me. I'm the one. Novelist Veronica Roth has solved time travel. No, but we cracked it for the book at least.
That's all that matters.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about the science that you must have known about or researched for Lightless. But do you think you could like pitch the book and then tell me about the science?
Absolutely. So Lightless is about a top secret military spacecraft that discovers it has two unknown men on board who might be terrorists. And after they come on board, as the members of the crew are trying to figure out what they want and why they're there, the ship itself starts to behave very strangely. And so it's...
Love it.
Exactly. It's like, what's going on with the ship? It's sort of haunted house thriller sci-fi thing. But I wrote it when I was in college and I was studying physics. So there was a lot of that ended up in the book. In terms of,
you study physics and you write books. Sorry,
I did. I
found impossible to me.
I write books. My day job is in theater, so I did all the careers my mother was afraid of. But so it sort of sunk into me because the idea happened in a thermodynamics class, which if you've ever taken thermodynamics is a living hell. It was great, but so it became a sort of thematic structure for the book, but also like physical underpinnings. So the rules of the book ended up being not just a structural one, like in a sort of narrative way that was based on physics, but also I tried to make the physics within reason plausible.
Yeah. I mean, I believed it, which isn't saying much since I took physics in high school and that's it. So it's like, sounds good.
Yeah, smart. But yes.
Did you look at other portrayals of AI, or did you just like develop your own as you went?
Sort of both. I ended up reading a lot about, so the coolest thing about AI is the Chinese room, which is the idea that if there's a person in a room and they have like a Chinese dictionary and you are giving them Chinese characters and they don't speak any Chinese, but they find the character and they write the English word and they send it back out. So you can put in a coherent message and get a coherent message out, but the person inside never understands what they're saying. And so the idea is if you have a computer that you put in an input and then it responds with something that feels very real, does the computer understand what it's saying, or is it simply doing what it's been programmed to do? At what point is it alive? So, which is very cool and goes deep into that question of like, what is sentience there?
Yeah, I'm mildly horrified by all that stuff. I mean, I'm into it, and I'm also afraid of it. And this was never more clear than when I watched Ex Machina. Did you see that movie?
That was great. I really like that. I really like that one. Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, it's sort of like when I was writing it, I tried to make it so that you didn't have to know the physics. You just had to know like what I told you. Sort of the way the like a magic system works, where you tell the reader like there's no magic that we know of, but you tell the reader like how it works. And so for the book, what they have to know is what you tell them. And something I found interesting about what you did in Chosen One is how much like desire was a part of making the magic work, which is obviously great narratively because then it's all about the characters, even though they're using magic. But
I was just thinking the way you developed it your science is very similar to the way I did the magic, because you do need rules. Otherwise, you can always like intercede on your own narrative, and be like, this thing suddenly, and then there's no greater way to make a reader feel betrayed and manipulated than by doing that. So you have to like set the boundaries in order to like win reader trust, I guess.
Right. Yes. And I sort of feel like it does have to go back to the character with what the character wants. In Lightless, it sort of comes back to character Althea. So the computer is doing all this weird stuff, but it's really about her interaction with the computer. Like in Chosen Ones, it's about what does Sloane want? She's struggling to use the magic. Spoilers. Sorry, it's a very good book. You should be reading right now. If you read quickly, you can catch up to this conversation.
That's such a huge spoiler. She's traumatized and magic doesn't work right for her. Yeah.
Exactly. And so it's sort of, she has to look inside her to figure out why it doesn't work right.
Mm-hmm.
Which is
well,
cool.
I had tried to, so I usually write sci-fi. Not terribly rigorous science sci-fi, like not hard sci-fi, but definitely science fiction. And for this book, I suddenly found myself in fantasy stuff suddenly. And what I tried to do, I think, is make it as sciencey as possible. So it was about sound and about
very cool.
a frequency that you can measure. And then there's a kind of romance there with like singing magic into being and humming and whistling and the world feeling loud because people are making use of this. But then I realized that if you make it so strict that it's just about frequency, then you can't account for any differences in power, which is what you need for a Dark Lord. Like if they can just like whistle him out of existence, then he's not really that threatening.
Rule, exactly.
Yeah. So that was kind of where the desire part of it came from, I guess. And I think I was interested in developing a magic system that women would be particularly good at. And I think
where one of the male characters can't really do a spell because his voice isn't high enough.
Yeah, I was like, but I think women, it's all about, they call magic the manifestation of impossible wants. And women want impossible things all the time. And it's not because they should be impossible, but unfortunately they often are. So that was my like little way into it, I think, with Sloane.
Yeah. And actually, speaking of Sloane and her wants, you introduce her not from her point of view, but from the point of view of this horrible reporter. He was awful. Like, I wanted to punch him. Why? I really like that. But what made you choose to introduce her from someone else's very skewed point of view rather than her own at the start?
It's funny because I really insisted on this. My editor had suggested moving that article later in the book because he was like, why do we want to see her this way? And I was like, actually, this is the way to see her, right? Because she's like a character archetype from from she's like tough girl, don't give a fuck, kind of like.
She's from Animorphs, yeah.
Yeah, she doesn't care about your opinions, and so I kind of wanted to show what she's up against, which is this perception of her as being prickly and unlikable and like hard and not grateful for media attention and just like everything terrible about a famous woman, right? Like how dare she?
Media attention? Who would be grateful? So
I know, seriously.
She gets the end of that stick.
Yeah, there's like that terrible moment where she's looking for her Spanx and she's like, if I don't wear these Spanx, people are gonna think I'm pregnant. It's like,
yes,
that's miserable.
That was very depressing.
Yes, like even in this alternate reality where we have magic, this is still a thing.
This is a thing.
Yeah. But then I just thought the contrast was nice between the hard-edged version of her that we see, and then in the next chapter, the first chapter of the book, she is clearly vulnerable and struggling. And I just think that's a nice reminder that people are always people, no matter how tough they seem, I guess.
Right. And then you sort of get context for why so many of the other characters react to her the way they do. When you're seeing her not so soft, squishy underside, but they're seeing the outer shell and either imagining a soft, squishy underside or just seeing the shell.
Yeah. Yeah. The hard candy shell on the outside.
Shell. Yes, yes. I did cringe at that. I went, no, honey, no.
Oh, yeah. If you guys don't know what we're talking about, you'll find out. It's like
Yes,
so
you'll
embarrassing. I kind of wanted to talk about at least why you decided to write science fiction as opposed to something more realistic. Because often I get asked this question, and it's like, well, I've always loved it. And then I wonder, why did I always love this more than anything else? And why do we gravitate toward it in general? So I wondered what it was like for you when you were thinking about writing.
I will answer that, but only if you answer it afterwards, because I'm interested in hearing your answer to that too.
Yeah.
I always liked sci-fi and fantasy. I read both. And then I got very into physics, obviously, and ended up studying it. And it's sort of, I could make up my own rules, or I could use the weird, freaky, fascinating rules of the universe that we live in. And so I wanted to have a black hole in the bottom of the ship, which is a functioning engine. I had one of my friends message me afterward, and he said, how does Anaki work? And I said, oh, here's the scientific paper. And he read it, and then he just said, that's sufficient. So that was the greatest day. He's at Caltech now. I'm like, thanks, you can't take it back. But it was, I felt like I was sort of discovering the rules in college as I studied it. And I sort of fed that right back out into the book that I was writing, which was very fun. So I guess it was more like I was interested in the world the way it is, and what I was writing at the time reflected that. And who knows, maybe in the future it'll switch to fantasy or back to sci-fi.
Yeah.
But, yeah. Because like we were talking about, it's really sort of the same spectrum.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly is. Because once you come up with like a scientific explanation for the magic, then suddenly like, is it magic anymore? Or is it just a thing we didn't know about before? So
who was the guy who said that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic? I forget who said it, but that is it's a good one. I think about that one when my grandma uses an iPhone. So it's
I know. Oh my God, my mom poking. I'm so sorry if she's in the chat right now. My mom poking around at a phone is always like a really scary thing, because I'm like, you don't know any of the inner logic of this system. Like, you think that if you touch the wrong thing, it'll be irreparably damaged, but like it has rules. You just don't know them.
If you obey the rules, yes, and that's how you end up blowing up Chicago. So
there you go. I've done it multiple times. Not really.
What draws you to sci-fi or fantasy? Because you sort of switched there.
Yeah, so I like the middle space. I think I've realized that because but like you, I'm really interested in what's in the world. I usually I watch a lot of nature documentaries. So I think if I had studied any kind of science, it would have been biology. But I just think the world is weird and wonderful, and especially like, oh man, if you've ever seen the Deep episode of Blue Planet.
No, I haven't.
Well, those creatures, it's like, how did these develop? It's like a fish with a bauble that glows ahead of its head, like face, like just bananas. So that's part of it. But I come up with, so people often ask, like, people ask writers, like, do you start with plot or with character? And for me, the answer is neither. Start with concept. And I think if you think that way, it's kind of, I can't imagine writing contemporary fiction that way. Like I want to, if I'm starting with like this weird idea or with a question about the future or about the implications of something that we're doing now, then it just kind of lends itself toward science fiction and fantasy. And since that was what I loved, and like, I don't know if you've ever had an idea for a contemporary story, but I'm always like, what do people do in real life?
Maybe I could put it on the moon. That is usually the inner thought process.
Well, when I was thinking about YA, I was like, what do teenagers, do they like just go to prom? Like, that's it. That's all teenagers do in my mind. Even though I was one. Like, I don't know what happens anymore. Like, unless they're on the run, from some kind of like evil entity. Like I just have no idea what people.
I spent my years 15 to 17 on the run from evil entities, so it's very accurate. Yeah.
Yeah, this is just basically an accurate story of my life that I'm putting.
Autobiography. So let me see. Okay, I misread the time and I was about to take questions, but we're going to do that in about another 10 minutes.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm still going. I've got a little like thing for you.
Oh my God. I have a little thing, but it's on the computer, so I can't bring it up, or the computer will in fact crash. So I'm going from memory here. I know. What was I going to say? I was going to talk about Matt and Sloane and their relationship. Yes. Which is sort of almost childhood sweethearts, I'd call it. The couple that comes at the end of the successful Chosen One books. Mm-hmm. And then you sort of start to see the cracks in that. And what was cool is that those cracks were really about what does Sloane want? Like, who is Sloane? And what made you choose to have that relationship, to show the scars in that relationship rather than keep them, I'm not going to spoil it, rather than keep them together. There we go. I'm going to spoil it.
It's fine. It happens pretty early.
But it's an interesting breakup. So why did you choose to show the way that falls apart? Was that sort of related to the way that you wanted this book to show the fall apart of the people's PTSD afterwards, or was that my question lost itself there?
No,
I'm interested in that.
Yeah. I think what I wanted to do is write about what happens to like the Chosen One's girlfriend, So she is a Chosen One in that she's part of this group, but they all kind of collectively agree that it was really Matt. He was the one. So then she becomes like just his girlfriend, right? And in the original, like you said, in the original Chosen One story that doesn't exist, but I refer to sort of, that's her role, is to be rescued and to be like gaga over this guy and for them to live happily ever after. But I just don't think that is necessarily what would happen. Two people, like, they've been through this trauma together and that will always bond them. And there's certainly like always fondness between them. And they will, always be connected. But there's this feeling that like he's kind of the only option available to her.
Yes.
For either of them, because it's like she says at one point, like, at what point do you reveal that you saved the world? Third date? Fourth date?
Do you put that in your bio, or do you sort of?
It's like neither of them will ever be understood by anyone else, but that's not a good reason to be together. So that was kind of my like thesis of it. And the reason I don't mind spoiling this, I think, is because he's not really like the focus. Like their love story is not the epic love story of this book. So I think it's all right. But and also like increasingly, like as I get older, I kind of root for like the second guy in the love triangle, like in the standard love triangle, or woman, like I don't care, whoever is met second. Because I think you do a lot of growing and changing like post-adolescence. And yeah, so I think you're more likely to, not that it never works, but you're more likely to kind of find someone who suits you when you're already an adult, and you know what you want and who you are.
Yes. Yeah, there's some, and I'm going to quote something else now, but I think it was, it's Buffy, but he describes like the teenage Buffy as cookie dough. Like she's not done baking yet. She's not really an adult yet. And it sort of felt like that for them. Like they ended up getting together when neither of them had really sort of come into themselves as they wanted to really be. Maybe it had, but Sloane definitely hadn't.
Well, and it's like someone who sees, he like wants her to be better than she is, and that's right. Really nice, I guess, for someone to believe in you, to see potential in you. But probably be with someone who loves you for who you are. So
yes.
I guess.
Sounds fake, but okay.
Whatever. Oh man. I'm trying to look at my questions for you.
Just popping up my thing here.
Okay, this weighs on my mind when I think about science fiction and fantasy, so I'd like to
Mhm.
ask it. Science fiction is kind of presented as being like necessarily more serious and about social commentary, and
Mm.
fantasy is often presented as like escapist. And I'm wondering if we agree with that collectively. I feel like probably no, but we can talk about why.
Yes, I mean, I read my fair share of like trashy fantasy novels when I was a kid. You know the ones. You know the ones.
Certainly.
Um, but I don't know. I feel like the fantasy and sci-fi is sort of ultimately a setting to me rather than a genre, because you can have a thriller that's in a fantasy world, or you can have a thriller that's in a sci-fi world, and it's fantasy or sci-fi, but the bones of the story are sort of a thriller. And so I think that in terms of just being on ends of the sci-fi fantasy spectrum, you can have any kind of seriousness, and then the setting of the world is something that you can pick separately from the seriousness setting, I guess.
Yeah, those vary infinitely. I've also heard that people say that fantasy is more about the past and sci-fi is more
Mm.
about the future. And you can certainly say, I mean, I'm not sure like if that's always true or anything. It does seem to be sort of roughly generally true in certain ways.
There's a lot
Uh,
of fantasy, yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's so ridiculous to make any generalizations at all. But I think if you think about it that way, then there's just as much of a capacity to say something important with a capital I, if that is your desire, about the past as you can about the future, which is
Sure.
usually about the present, obviously. You know.
Yes, always about the present, even if it's about the past.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, I'm
yeah, but
always
I
writing about myself, right? Like secretly.
yes,
So it's just always about the
ultimate act of ego, yes. But no, I do think of have you ever read Left Hand of Darkness?
I have started that book at least 5 times. It's
It
not
is
that it's not good. It's just a lot.
it's a great book, but nothing happens. It's one of those. But it's sci-fi, but it's set in a world that's basically a fantasy world.
Yeah.
Um,
I think
and
that's what I had trouble adjusting to. I was
yeah,
prepared for one kind of book and I got a different kind of book. And it's not that I
right.
was like upset about it, but I had to get used to it.
Yeah, I need to know what I'm going into beforehand when I go into a book, or I have to take a minute to stop.
Yeah.
And so for a book like that, it interests me. Like, is it about the future? Because it's about the future in a very real way. It's about the future of the society in the book. Or is it about the past, which is it's about looking back into humanity's past and how it compares to that.
Yeah.
So I do think a lot of sci-fi does that too, in terms of just looking in the way that the past was compared to now when technology has changed it. If it's one of those sci-fi books that's about technology, I
Yeah.
mean, so
One of those.
one of those, yes, those
Are there
vulgar
sci-fi
novels.
books that aren't about technology?
Well,
I guess
there's
there
sort
are.
of like Star Wars style
Yeah.
where it's
I wrote one like that. What am
that's
I
great.
talking about? Veronica, shut up.
There's a little technology always. So
Oh,
lightsabers are some great technology, for instance.
sure, but how do they work?
But how do they work? How does the hand siphon work? Because I want one.
I,
Actually, is what I
I
want.
looked up so many. Okay, so for people who don't know, the way that you do magic in the book is not with a wand or with a magical hammer. It's with this like kind of jewelry glove situation. So I have this Pinterest board that's just like a series of hands with like beautiful jewelry on them. And I'm like, um, yeah,
Yeah, and it's cool because the different siphons that people wear, they can wear them in different places according to what their particular talents or aesthetic desires are, which a magic system that builds in the need for the aesthetics is excellent. But they can have like throat siphons, which are cool, hand siphons. I think
and
there
they're
was like a waistband siphon or something unusual, the spine
oh
siphon.
well, yeah. They make some jokes about others. Never mind.
I mean, where do I buy these? I need some.
I know.
So
Well, just send a ballistic missile deep into the ocean and explode magic into being, and then we'll be cooking with fire.
yes, the you mentioned the Blue Planet documentary about the deep. Was it just the idea of like the horrible, terrifying bowels of the ocean, or was there something that they Was there something particular about what they showed in that episode that sort of inspired the underwater secret thing?
Yes, so the magical origin story, which has to do with the Mariana Trench. I find that the deep ocean is profoundly terrifying. About as terrifying to me as the endless blackness of space. So,
and we are trapped.
Yeah, there's nothing that freaks me out more than like eyeball horror, and it ends up in every book that I write. So it's just like leaning into like the most terrifying things I can, and I don't know why, but that's just how it is. And it's like, but I was mostly thinking of, so in the alternate history of the book, which I won't say too much about because it's hard to not spoil everything, but in the alternate history of the book, there isn't a space race, there's like a race to the deepest parts of the ocean. So I listened to like whale sounds in the Mariana Trench, and you can find those online, and it will just like fill you with existential dread in a way that very few things can. Anyway, do you have a similar interest in the horror of space? Does it alarm you or intrigue you?
Space is great. It's terrifying. One of my favorite things is, I love black holes. They're really cool. So
what do you love about them?
Okay, so I'll answer this question, then I'll ask you some questions from our little ask a question thing. But so what black holes are, what's cool about black holes is how they're the extreme crunch of general relativity. And so all sorts of weird stuff can happen there. Like you can have time travel in the immediate vicinity of a black hole. You can have a sort of time travel is the wrong word. Somewhere my physics professors are flinching, but you have a sort of subjective time travel as you approach the event horizon because time and space are so greatly compacted that weird stuff starts happening. Like you start stretching out. You theoretically could watch the entire universe from like the event horizon. Once you cross the event horizon, this is a cool detail. Time becomes space and space becomes time because sign flips on the not geodesic, the state thing, physics term, the state thing, the equation.
Okay.
So
you could say the wrong term right now, and I'd be like, I love it.
Yes, there's just a lot of really extreme things happen there, and really trippy things. I love trippy things like that, like weird dream sequences in movies. I'm all in. So that is what's very fascinating and also completely horrifying. So,
have you ever read Roadside Picnic?
No, I have not.
Okay. I haven't either, but my husband has. We talked about it at length, so I feel like I have read it. But anyway, there's like an alien, like aliens come to Earth and they leave behind this like place where things go wrong, basically, and it reminds me of the black hole thing.
Yeah. Ooh, I'm gonna check that out. It's like Three Body Problem, which is an awesome book. Very trippy.
Yes, that's another one that I started. Then I started researching the Chinese Cultural Revolution and forgot to return to I was like, why am I researching the Cultural Revolution? Anyway, I'm working on it.
It takes you over. You're like, wow, this is fascinating. And then, a couple hours later, you're like, wait, aliens, I'm back. And it's an amazing book. So once you get out of the media hole. All right. So our top question here is from Steph. She says, I loved how you incorporated the interviews, articles, and reports into the storyline instead of just relying on flashbacks. Did you always plan to structure the book this way? Was it easier or harder for you to do this way? That was really interesting the way you did that. I liked how you got the external perspective. But was that always the plan from the beginning?
It was not. No. In my original proposal of the book, which is what sold the book, I did flashbacks, sort of. And it didn't feel right. It felt like I was pulling myself in two different directions, and I only wanted to go in the one, so I was only interested in the story moving forward, the post Chosen One story, but you have to know what happened to them before in order to really understand them. So the documents came about as a kind of way to sort of reveal what they went through 10 years ago, but then also have it have an impact on the forward moving narrative. So Sloane submits a Freedom of Information Act request about herself, and they send her all of the documents they have related to her that she's cleared to see. And she discovers a lot of troubling things about some of the adult figures in her life when she was young, and that then influences, her emotional and psychological issues moving forward. So I love when stuff in books accomplishes multiple things. That's really great. You can tell I'm a writer. But sort of like the magic system, how it's magic, but also it's like a character developing tool. That's how I felt about the documents. They sort of like pushed the narrative forward while also informing us about what came before, and that seemed efficient.
Yes, something I like about the documents is how much they developed the personality of their handler, whose name I'm blanking on, Bert.
Bert, yeah.
They developed Bert so much, and you never really see Bert the way they did, but you really feel like you sort of know who he actually was by the end of them. So, in one way or another.
Yeah, I mean, he's like a complex parent figure. And I think that's also something that happens in your 20s, right? You look at your parents and you're like, I see that you're a person with flaws.
Yes,
of your own.
They're everywhere. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Usually you don't have a Freedom of Information Act to find that out, though, mercifully.
No, thank goodness.
All right. So Bibliophile wants to know, what advice would you give for someone about to start looking for an agent or getting into publication in college?
Well, I think it's important to focus on college, which is rich of me to say. But actually, you and I are in similar positions here because you wrote your book when you were in college, right?
Yes. Got my agent just as I graduated, so.
Nice, yeah.
Good thing.
So I guess advice, I mean, do pay attention in your classes, person who is in college and wants to be a writer, because you only get to go to college once,
Right.
Undergrad at least. So, there's that. But then, I don't know, one of my pieces of advice is to learn as much as you can about the industry before you try to enter it, because I think a lot of people get eager and they just like throw themselves in there, and they get really excited by like the first offer that comes their way or the first interest. And you should really, like, if you keep informed, then you can advocate for yourself better. And one recommendation I have for that is to listen to the First Draft podcast by Sarah Enni. She's launching this series that's about the publishing industry. So she's interviewed like editors and agents and everyone, and it's pitched as like all like what you don't know about publishing. So listen to that. It's good. Do you have advice, Kaylin?
I do. I mean, you can use. I wrote when I wasn't doing coursework or hanging out with friends. So like that was sort of my extracurricular. So you can do that, and there's a lot to inspire you in college, which is great. But I also feel like you sort of need to prepare yourself emotionally. I mean, it's sort of easy to. You're putting yourself out there a lot when you just send an agent a manuscript, and everyone has the same advice, which is, get ready for rejection, but not even getting ready for rejection, just sort of get ready to be seen by other people, which can be in its own way very intimidating. So maybe they'll just see the hard shell of you like Sloan, but there's a lot of
not.
Probably not, but just sort of the idea of being seen by other people who you don't necessarily know and whose opinions may or may not matter to you. Because if you're painfully shy, like I was in college, that's a thing. Let's see. All right. So J.J. Howard wants to know, in the first chapter of a book, what ratio do you feel is best for describing the environment versus characters? So I guess sort of like how, when you're starting a book, how much attention do you pay to the characters? How much do you pay to the world building?
This is a tough one because it really depends. I feel like I try to think about this one piece of advice that one of my college writing professors gave me. She said it's important to get a character in, and you can do that with really specific and concrete details about that character. So I can't think of like a really good example, but one example that I'm thinking of is I had a character in a draft once who was very fussy about her buttons being straight. And to me, that was like one of those character revealing details where you don't have to do like a whole heap of work to really get that character understood, because you understand that she's like very conscientious and also potentially anxious and maybe like a little uptight. All those things are communicated very quickly with simple descriptions like that. So the more you can find those things, the less you'll have to spend on that stuff. And revealing character through behavior rather than telling me something or giving me any backstory is way more powerful. So focusing on that too, like having your first chapter be one in which your character acts, does something, talks to someone. As active as possible. That's like the rule for characters, right?
Hit the ground running. Yeah.
Yeah. Throw yourself in there.
Yeah. So, yeah, and sort of in a way, when you describe the environment, sometimes you're describing the character too. Like if you're in someone's bedroom, the way you're describing that is you're describing the person, but even just like how are they interacting with the environment, that sort of thing.
Yeah, like if someone is, throws a piece of litter on the sidewalk, you know a lot about them suddenly.
Exactly, yes. So in the way that in the first bit of Chosen Ones, the way that Sloane enters, the way that the guy describes her tells you something about her and also a lot about him. So
yeah. Rick Lane, what a treasure.
Exactly. It says about him that he deserves to be snacked. So let's see. All right. There's someone here who says, where did you get the idea for the Chosen Ones?
Oh, well, I mean, basically, if you like science fiction and fantasy, Chosen One stories are a part of your life, necessarily. So, like, for me, one of the big ones was Harry Potter, because I was 11 when those came out, and, I just kind of, like, followed them. But then also, like, Lord of the Rings and Dune and Ender's Game and even The Giver and, all those, and Animorphs, like, all Chosen One stories.
I never thought of Dune as a Chosen One story, but it definitely is, yeah.
Yeah. So I think I always loved them. And then Divergent is a Chosen One story also. So, it's not classic, like Triss isn't fated to save the world or something, but she is like special and set apart and she does save the world. So I guess. Yeah. So I kind of started to wonder like about the psychology of someone who takes on that burden at an early age and how they would cope with it and whether they'd be able to have healthy adult relationships after spending so much of their time preparing for this catastrophic thing. Even if they triumph, it's still like, I don't know, like, can you imagine being Harry Potter and being famous for murdering someone? Like, I guess he didn't like actually do it, like it rebounded or whatever, but like, he's responsible for the death of someone, even if he deserved it. Like, that's a hard thing to take on. So I guess I found myself with a lot of sympathy for those characters and curiosity about them. So that's kind of where the idea came from.
Right, and the idea that all that happens when you're, when you're not fully grown, and then the rest of your life is sort of answering to that, especially as you develop you do the Freedom of Information Act and realize that things are not all as they seemed. Yeah. So. All right, we have a question from Rachel, which says, I'm always struggling over whether my ideas are too far-fetched. How do you build your story from research, current events, etc., and how much is just pure imagination? So how much are you inspired by your research and current events, and how much just sort of rises up?
Well, it seems like for you, it was like you found out about some things, and then you found the inspiration from that. Does it ever happen the other way around for you?
It's sort of, no, it usually starts for me from like, for Lightless, it was, wouldn't it be cool if you had just two characters in a room interrogating, just like a basic like black box play type, because in addition to studying physics in college, I studied a little bit of theater too. And so just a black box play going on. And so it sort of built from that. And then I was surrounded by the physics and I went, what are some physics sci-fi things that I think are cool that could sort of build onto that? So for me, there wasn't really any current events at all, although, of course, you're always influenced by what's around you.
P.S. That was like the most tense I've been reading a book, is reading the extended interrogation. I was just like sweaty the whole time. Anyway, not to embarrass you on the live stream, but
good blushes. So.
Yeah. So I think it kind of works in both directions, sort of like what you're saying. Like sometimes I love something and I want to incorporate it into a book. And sometimes it goes the other way. So like I had an idea for a short story, Arc is the name of it, but it's about the world is ending because a giant asteroid is coming toward it, but that's not really what the story's about. It's about like the scientists who are cataloging the last things they can, living things they can before they have to blast off and flee. And I had to, for reasons, had to research orchids for that. Because I wanted there to be like a sort of a useless but beautiful thing. Like, sorry, orchids, but we can't eat you, so like you're not that useful.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I ended up researching them. And so you find out like the things you research become interesting to you because you have to, but often it's the other way around. So I've now lost track of the question, but the world is fascinating. Be curious about it. That's like the best quality for a writer, I think.
Yes, be interested in everything. Let's see. All right, using a prologue. Like, how do you handle what to do instead of info? And what tips do you have for self-editing and proofreading?
Uh-oh, do you think you can repeat that? Because you froze up for me a little bit.
Absolutely. I asked 3 questions. So let's go with the first. So Bibliophile wants to know, what's a good suggestion for not using a prologue? And they're talking about instead of like info dumping the background at the start, sort of how do you handle that information, giving the reader the information they need to know about the background, which there's a lot of in Chosen Ones, especially because there's the whole other novel that's not written that happened to them before.
the pre-novel.
Pre-novel.
So I am biased against prologues. Not everyone agrees with me. When I was a kid, used to skip them because I thought they were optional. Sort of like, this is unrelated, but it is an interesting anecdote. When I met my husband, I commented to him that he was eating the coleslaw that comes next to your burger, like a standard burger joint.
Right.
And I was like, wait, people eat that? I thought it was just for show. And he's like, you thought they put food on your plate for show? Like, what's wrong with you? I was like, I just never realized people ate that.
Flower. It's decorative.
Like a garnish. Anyway, that's how I felt about prologues. Prologues are the coleslaw of books.
Perfect. Yes.
But mostly, you might want to examine where your story starts. Like, why do you need a prologue is the important question to answer. So, like, do you? Because I think a lot of times writers have a lot of knowledge about the story that they're writing, and they feel like everything is essential. But it's actually not. It might be interesting. It might be useful for you to know, but that doesn't mean that it's necessary to move forward. And so if you require a prologue, like if you really can't not have one, then you might be starting your story in the wrong place.
Right.
And as far as backstory, like, I don't think you have to get it right. Like, just throw everything into that rough draft, like literally saturate it with a backstory. And then when you're done, you'll realize which parts of it you can take out. And this is why drafts are so important. Because like you can't know what you're going to need to get to the end until you're there. And then you can go back and either add stuff in or subtract it.
Yes. My first draft mantra is nobody needs to see this ever. It can be anything. No one needs to know. And then afterwards, it can be something that people can see.
Yeah. Do you ever like try to trick yourself? Because like I write in Scrivener, but if I'm like really nervous about it, I'll open a Word document and I'm like, seriously, no one needs it. It's not even going in the official rough draft. This is like a side rough draft.
Well, I always end up with like 12 drafts. So when I start the first one, I'm like, really, no one will see this. I've got 11 more to go. So,
so that's a lot of drafts, my friend.
Yeah. Well, by the last one, I'm just doing copy edits. It's less work every time. Although if it makes me sound more impressive, then yes, I rewrite the entire book 12 times.
Such dedication.
And in fact, we have a question here, which is how many drafts do you do before you finally feel like you've accomplished what you wanted to accomplish with the book?
Well, this changes for me with every book. So with Chosen Ones, I oh gosh, there were probably like 6 altogether if we're counting the copy edited one.
Right.
There was like the proposal one, which was total, like I just threw it out. After the book sold, I was like, John, I hope you weren't attached to this because I'm throwing it in the garbage. It's like, okay. And, then there's like the one I wrote without interstitials, and then there's the one I wrote with interstitials, and then there's the one I wrote after writing the interstitials and having to adjust the rest of the book accordingly, and then there was like line edits and copy edits. So I don't know. I think that's like 6. For some books, it's been less. Like the vision is clearer at first, and I just don't need as much like rewriting. That was like a miracle that happened with my last novel. I was like, yeah, are you sure this doesn't need editing? I went and sent it to like other. It did still need editing, but just like not as much.
Didn't need the full-on overhaul. That's awesome.
And Cars Mark was like 15 drafts, so I don't know. Yeah.
It's a question for me. Have you ever done that kind of big change of structure in the middle of a book where because you said you didn't have the inserts beforehand, and then you added the newspaper articles later? How did that sort of change the way you thought about how the book was going to go? Or was it easy, like, oh, I'll just take out this chapter and toss it in?
Well, I didn't write the whole book without knowing they would be there. It's just that I couldn't write them and alternate because it required going into Sloane's head and then coming out of it and going into like a newspaper article and then going, so it's just like
didn't make sense. Out of the headspace, yeah.
Yeah, so it didn't change the way I thought about it exactly, but it did give me ideas when I was moving forward. I was like, oh, you can write a piece about this. And then they did end up affecting the world building. So I'd make a decision in one of the interstitials, like about technology or about design or something like that in the world. And then I would have to like incorporate it throughout the entire draft. So it was a small nightmare, but a nice one.
It's a cracking nightmare. And then we have a question here. It says, where did you get the inspiration for the magic in Chosen Ones? We know where you got the inspiration for the vortices, but just the magic system in general.
I think I was searching for something that I could make some science of, like I was talking about earlier.
Exactly.
And I was thinking about stuff that's measurable, and the one consideration that was special with this magic system is if you can't like produce sound you have a physical inability to produce sound, or you can't hear, like, can you still do this magic? And I had to figure that out. That was because I wanted it to be like accessible to everyone. And so they accomplished that with like whistles and devices that you insert into your teeth and stuff like that to make sound. So I wanted it to be measurable for that. That was pretty much the only reason I committed to that in like very initial point. So I was like, even if you can't hear the sound that you're making, you can still measure what range it's in. So yeah, and I don't know, there was something fun about making it like technology that's powered by something we don't understand. So I don't know if that really answers the question, but that's sort of where it came from.
It's sort of like, I'm going to make a very nerdy comparison here. It's sort of like, debugging a code when you make a magic system like that. And like you said, coming up, realizing that, wait, I've got a sound-based magic system. What about people who can't hear or who can't make sound? How do I make it work for them? Do you ever end up when you're, writing a manuscript, you're like, okay, here's the idea, here's the setup. And then you get to a point and you're like, wait, how does that work? Oh, yeah, exactly. Damn it. How does that work with you hit some code you need to debug there. How does that work with the magic system?
Oh, well, sometimes you can figure out a solution, and I find it helps to brainstorm with other people, even if they aren't writers, like my spouse, not a writer, just a humble reader, I guess. And we do a lot of talking things out where he's like, like, what are you talking about? But consulting with other writers helps, because they kind of know what's tripping you up exactly. And sometimes you can't fix something. Sometimes you have to do the devastating thing where you go back into your draft and you completely gut it and rewrite it.
Yes. Crippling moment.
Yeah. What's the, I'm just curious, what's the most you've ever deleted?
The most I've ever deleted, well, the very first draft of Lightless that no one ever saw was every time So Lightless is structured where it's long interrogations, where this man named Ivan is being interrogated about what he knows. And in the original draft, the interrogations with Ivan slipped into first person with Ivan, which was a terrible idea that I quickly recovered from. But the reason I got stuck is because I got snarled up in this idea of, how much of what he's saying is true. What's the signifier for what's true and what's not true? Am I being honest with the reader, or is this all nonsense that he's spewing? Because obviously when you write prose, it's not the same as a dialogue. And so I ended up deleting all of that.
Wow.
Yes. Yes. Except for like select phrases that I kept. So
yeah, but I could see why you would definitely need it in third person with him, right?
Yeah, because you're not supposed to know what he's thinking. You can't see, like, you have to see how Sloane feels so that you understand her, but you couldn't see how Ivan feels, or it ruins half the supply prizes in the book. So, but yeah, that was a lot of words that got deleted.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's see. I'm gonna see another question. Sydney Danielle wants to know, what are the benefits of choosing to segregate your stories into sections, like part 1, part 2? Because you break Chosen Ones into a part 1, a part 2, and a part 3.
I do. Yes.
You do.
I like it. With this book, it was actually necessary for one of them, and then probably not necessary strictly. It's hard to explain without spoiling things, so I'm not going to. But suffice it to say that when you read the book, you'll understand why there's part distinctions, especially with the placement of the maps. That is my hint. But I also I like a pause in a book. I probably overuse them or don't use them judiciously, but when something really significant has happened that has shifted the whole course of the narrative, I like the physical, representation of it, in that you just have to turn an extra page. I like it when I read books and they have them, so I think I'm like, hey. I'm gonna use it.
It also sort of helps break down like Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, if you're looking at it from like a 3-act structure kind of thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a smarter answer than mine.
Feels like a play too, so not to bring theater back in, but
well, please.
All right, let's see. I'm gonna pick something from the bottom because I've been picking things from the top. All right. Neha Patel wants to know, what is your favorite classic science fiction or fantasy novel? Also, are you more of a plotter or a pantser when you write?
Okay. Classic
sci-fi fantasy.
It's Dune. Yeah. Gotta be. It has troubling things in it. I will not tell you that it is aged perfectly. It doesn't matter because the things that are, it probably matters to some people. I shouldn't be dismissive. If you don't like it, that's fair. But I love Dune because it is such a classic Chosen One story. Like the whole weird manipulative religion aspects of that book are really interesting. And the world building is fascinating, just the planet Arrakis and how it works internally with the worms and the spice, and how the whole universe is structured around this drug that lets you see the future. I don't know. It's great. And it was the first time I had seen something like that in sci-fi. It was the first sci-fi experience I had that made me realize how much I loved it. And so for me, that's my favorite. Yeah.
Did you ever watch the Sci-Fi Channel Dune miniseries?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
The costumes are so funny. They have these very strange Pope hat kind of things, and
yes.
And I also strangely love now the David Lynch one, even though
it's close to my heart. It's very weird.
And I can't wait for the next one. I don't care if it's bad. I'm just excited to see it.
I'm here for it. Someone just has to say the spice, who controls the spice controls the universe. And I'm like, great, fantastic. Let's see some worms.
Mm-hmm. What's your favorite classic, real quick?
Favorite? I'm going to have to say Lord of the Rings, because that was my thing when the movies came out. I read the book first because I wasn't allowed to go see the movies till I read the book. And I love Lord of the Rings. I just rewatched the movies, extended editions,
Wow.
last week. Yeah, I know. It was a commitment. My girlfriend had never seen them.
Quarantine activity.
Exactly. So I haven't.
Wait, did you say your girlfriend hadn't seen them before?
I hadn't seen them before. It was great.
Gasp.
Which is good. We're still together then. So, but yeah, I'm gonna have to go with Lord of the Rings.
I'll find choice.
Funny anecdote I found out recently, which is J.R.R. Tolkien absolutely hated Dune, which seems completely unfair because they're very sort of the same vibe to me. But
both very committed to their world.
Yes.
Like, more than the story, the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's really funny. Ooh, I want to know more. I'm going to look up their beef.
It was really funny because he was so polite about it too.
Well,
yes. The second part of the question was, are you more of a plotter or a pantser when you write?
Yeah. I started as a pantser, as I think many writers do, because you're like, planning it robs it of the joy of discovery. And now all I do is plan. I think what helped me to do that was writing Divergent, because I did, in fact, plan the thing that people want to know if I planned, which is like the end of the series. I did plan that, but I didn't plan the structure of the story very well. And so what I found myself doing in the third book is I had this info dump that had to happen because they leave the city and you need to find out what's been going on outside and how the city was made and all that stuff. But that series probably didn't have to be structured in quite that way. And I just had this moment where I was like, I should have mapped this out. And it would have made things easier for me in the long run. So joy of discovery is important, but, what's more important?
Right.
And so since then, I have been outlining with increasing detail. And the thing is that an outline is never perfect. So you do deviate from it and you do get moments of discovery. They're just a little different than they were before. And what you don't get is totally lost on page 75, which is what used to happen to me. So I'm really happy to be past that part of my writing life. Yeah.
Yes. Plotters forever. I plot everything.
I would expect that of you.
Yes, I always lose track of the subtext if I don't. Oh, hello.
Hi.
Hey guys. This has been lovely. Unfortunately, we're running a little bit low on time. But this has been just such a wonderful, refreshing, chummy conversation, and I feel so lucky to have seen it.
Oh, thanks.
Absolutely. I don't mean to be a damper, but we gotta wrap up. I have a question for both of you. We as a bookstore are really interested in what our authors are reading through this period of isolation and distancing. What are you guys turning to or planning on turning to?
Well, I've been losing my mind a little bit, so I haven't read anything new in a bit. But the last thing I read, which I totally recommend, is This Is How You Lose the Time War by Amal El Motar and Max Gladstone. It's shorter, a novella, I think, and it's romantic and it's well written and it's great. So.
Yeah, the next thing on my list is actually also a novella. I am also not reading anything currently. I also have trouble reading something when I'm trying to work on a manuscript. So the last book I read was Veronica's, and the next book I'm going to read is a novella by Caitlin Starling, Yellow Jessamine. It's I don't think it has come out yet, but it will soon. It's this gothic horror plant thing. I've read her other book, which is awesome. So I'm really looking forward to reading this one. So that's next.
Write that down.
Yeah. Yes.
That's so cool. Thank you so much. So yeah, thank you both for this. This is a lovely way to spend a Friday night. My mom and me. Yeah. Right. And we thank our audience for being here too, because your patronage is what's letting us bring you this programming, and we really can't host these kinds of events without the book sales to support them. So I'll plug that green button at the bottom once again. A reminder that tonight we have that really special book plate promotion. You'll get an email after you order the book with the link to the Google form that the publisher has put together. So be sure to take advantage of that. It's really special, and we're really proud to be offering it tonight. You can also follow Politics in Prose for some of our future events by clicking up this time on our logo up at the top. You can follow us there. We've got some really great events coming down the pipeline. And you'll be updated on all of those too. So we just thank you so much, and stay well read. We hope to see you next time.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thanks.
Bye guys.